December 26, 1944. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, the telephone suddenly rang. On the other end was General George S. Patton. His message was only 4 words long. "We're through to Bastogne." Those words changed everything. General Dwight D. Eisenhower had expected Patton to eventually break to the German lines, but not this quickly. Not in the middle of a brutal snowstorm. Not after a nearly impossible 90-degree pivot of an entire army that military experts believed could not be accomplished in time. Yet Patton had done exactly what he promised. For perhaps the first time in the war, Eisenhower realized that Patton had not exaggerated. He had delivered the impossible. What Eisenhower said during that phone call, and in the tense hours afterward, revealed the true nature of their complicated relationship. Respect mixed with frustration, admiration mixed with doubt. It also marked the decisive turning point of the Battle of the Bulge. This is the story of the phone call that saved Bastogne, and the words that followed. It began on December 19, 1944, during the emergency conference at Verdun. German forces had launched a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, smashing through American lines and creating what would become known as the Bulge. Allied commanders were stunned. Entire units were retreating in confusion. Communications were breaking down, and nobody fully understood the scale of the German attack. At the center of the crisis stood Bastogne, a vital crossroads town defended by the surrounded 101st Airborne Division. If Bastogne fell, German armored divisions could continue westward, potentially splitting Allied armies in two and changing the course of the war. Inside the conference room, Eisenhower gathered the senior commanders and asked the question that would define the battle. How soon can you attack north and relieve Bastogne? Most generals answered cautiously. They discussed logistics, weather, fuel shortages, and troop positioning. Moving large forces through frozen roads and blizzard conditions seemed nearly impossible. Then Patton spoke. December 22nd, with 3 divisions. The room fell silent. Many officers believed Patton was grandstanding again. What he proposed bordered on insanity. Disengaging divisions already fighting in the Saar region, pivoting them 90 degrees, moving them over 100 miles through winter storms, and launching a coordinated counterattack within 48 hours. No one believed it could be done. Eisenhower studied Patton carefully. He knew Patton's reputation for bold promises and reckless confidence, but he also knew that in moments of crisis, Patton was often the only commander aggressive enough to act decisively. Leaning forward, Eisenhower spoke in a calm but serious tone. "George, understand this. The 101st is surrounded. If Bastogne falls, it will be a disaster, militarily and psychologically. When you say December 22nd, do you truly mean it?" Patton didn't hesitate. "Ike, my staff already prepared 3 contingency plans before this meeting even started. I anticipated the German breakthrough. On December 22nd, 4th Armored Division attacks north toward Bastogne. I staked my career on it." For a moment, Eisenhower said nothing. Patton's level of preparation shocked him. While many Allied commanders were still reacting to the German offensive, Patton had already planned his response before receiving orders. Finally, Eisenhower nodded. "All right, George, you've got your chance. But if you fail, if those paratroopers are destroyed because you promised more than you could deliver, there will be consequences. No more second chances." Patton answered simply, "I'll be there. Ike, count on it." After the meeting ended, Eisenhower privately spoke with his chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith. According to Smith's later recollections, Eisenhower admitted he was taking an enormous gamble. If Patton failed, Bastogne could fall, thousands of American soldiers could be lost, and both commanders' reputations might be ruined. But Eisenhower also confessed something surprising. For the first time, he truly believed Patton might succeed. Over the next 2 days, reports from 3rd Army headquarters continued arriving at Supreme Headquarters. Each update sounded more unbelievable than the last. Patton's forces were actually moving. Divisions disengaged from combat. Convoys pushed north through snow and ice. Tanks rolled across frozen roads day and night. Supply lines stretched to the limit as Patton drove his army forward with relentless speed. By December 21st, Eisenhower began allowing himself cautious optimism. Against all odds, Patton might actually pull it off. December 26, 1944, approximately 4:45 p.m. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force in Versailles, General Dwight D. Eisenhower sat in his office, reviewing the latest reports from the Ardennes. The Battle of the Bulge had entered its second brutal week. American forces had finally stabilized the northern shoulder of the German breakthrough, but the overall situation remained dangerous. German armor still threatened Allied lines, and the vital crossroads town of Bastogne remained surrounded. Inside the town, the exhausted 101st Airborne Division continued to resist despite freezing weather, artillery bombardments, and dwindling supplies. Then the phone rang. A duty officer stepped forward. "General Patton calling from Luxembourg, sir." Eisenhower immediately grabbed the receiver. "George." On the other end was General George S. Patton. "Ike, we're through to Bastogne. 4th Armored made contact with the 101st at 1,650 hours. The corridor is narrow, but it's open. We're pushing supplies through now." For a moment, Eisenhower said nothing. Witnesses later recalled the scene inside his office. First came visible relief. Weeks of tension seemed to leave his body at once. His shoulders relaxed. Then something few officers had ever seen from Eisenhower. His eyes became moist. He quietly turned away from his staff for a moment to regain composure before speaking again. "George, say that again." "You're through." "Confirmed, Ike," Patton answered. Captain William Dwight's company from the 37th Tank Battalion made first contact. "The paratroopers are battered, but they're holding. We're reinforcing the corridor now." When Eisenhower replied, emotion filled his voice. "George, congratulations. You did it. You actually did it." Then his tone shifted back to command. "How secure is the corridor?" Patton responded with characteristic confidence. "German counterattacks are hitting us hard, but we're holding. I'm pushing additional units forward. By tomorrow, Bastogne will be secure." After a brief tactical discussion, the call ended. Eisenhower remained silent for several seconds before turning toward his staff. General Walter Bedell Smith later recorded Eisenhower's exact reaction. "Gentlemen, George Patton has just accomplished something I wasn't sure was possible. He promised December 22nd and delivered December 26th. Given the weather and the conditions, that's close enough to miraculous." Then Eisenhower did something rarely seen during crisis. He smiled. "Get me a message to the 101st. Tell them relief has arrived. And send my personal congratulations to General Patton and 3rd Army. They've just changed the entire complexion of this battle." The breakthrough at Bastogne immediately became more than just a battlefield victory. For days, panic had spread across the United States. Newspapers questioned whether the Germans might split Allied armies apart. Rumors circulated that the offensive could delay victory in Europe or even force a negotiated peace. The relief of Bastogne was the first major good news since the German offensive began. On December 27th, Eisenhower released an official public statement. Units of Lieutenant General George S. Patton's 3rd Army have successfully broken through to relieve American forces surrounded at Bastogne. This operation, executed under extremely difficult winter conditions and against determined enemy resistance, demonstrates the fighting quality of American soldiers and the operational excellence of their commanders. The defenders of Bastogne displayed extraordinary courage and determination. Their relief by 3rd Army forces marks a turning point in repelling the German offensive. The statement carefully balanced praise between the defenders of Bastogne and Patton's relief operation. Publicly, Eisenhower remained diplomatic and measured. Privately, however, his words reveal far more. In a message to British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, Eisenhower admitted, "Patton's performance in relieving Bastogne was exceptional. The speed with which he pivoted his army and launched a coordinated attack exceeded my expectations, and I suspect German expectations as well." To General Omar Bradley, Patton's direct superior, Eisenhower spoke even more openly. "George delivered when it mattered most. Whatever frustrations I've had with his behavior and insubordination, this operation justifies my decision to keep him in command. He did what no other general could have done." Yet Eisenhower's relationship with Patton remained deeply complicated. Soon afterward, he sent Patton a personal message that perfectly reflected both admiration and caution. George, congratulations on a brilliant operation, brilliantly executed. Your planning, your army's execution, and your personal leadership made the difference. I am proud of what Third Army accomplished. However, I want to be clear, this does not erase previous issues or give license for future insubordination. You've proven what you can do when you follow orders and work within the command structure. Continue doing that, and there is no limit to what you can achieve. The message captured Eisenhower perfectly. Sincere praise combined with firm boundaries. He respected Patton's brilliance, but he also understood the danger of an uncontrollable commander. In the days following Bastogne's relief, Eisenhower's diary entries and private letters revealed his true thoughts about Patton and the burden of command. On December 28th, he wrote to his wife, "Patton has done something remarkable. I've spent so much time frustrated with George, his ego, controversies, and insubordination, that I sometimes forget why I keep him in command." Bastogne reminded me, when the stakes are highest, when the situation appears impossible, George delivers. I do not know if any other general could have done what he did. That is simultaneously reassuring and concerning. Am I becoming too dependent on one difficult man? In another message to General George C. Marshall, Eisenhower analyzed the operation more strategically. The Bastogne operation demonstrates both the strengths and the challenges of coalition command. Patton's operational execution was flawless, exactly the kind of aggressive mobile warfare we require. However, his ability to anticipate the crisis and prepare contingency plans beforehand raises difficult questions regarding how much autonomy commanders should possess during rapidly changing situations. Even in victory, Eisenhower remained cautious. But one truth was now undeniable. When the Allied position stood on the edge of disaster, Patton had delivered the impossible. One issue continued troubling General Dwight D. Eisenhower even after the relief of Bastogne. How much freedom should a brilliant subordinate commander actually have? General George S. Patton had prepared for a German offensive that many senior Allied commanders failed to anticipate. While others reacted to the crisis after it began, Patton had already developed contingency plans and positioned his army to respond immediately. In Eisenhower's view, that raised difficult questions. Patton had been right. The rest of them had been wrong. In a message to General George C. Marshall, Eisenhower reflected on the uncomfortable reality revealed by the Battle of the Bulge. Patton prepared for a German offensive that most of us did not see coming. He was right and we were wrong. The challenge is determining how to balance that kind of foresight against the necessity of unified command. Privately, Eisenhower was even more honest. In his personal diary, he admitted, "George exhausts me. Managing him requires more energy than managing 3 ordinary commanders combined." Yet despite all the frustration, Eisenhower could not ignore the results. What he accomplished at Bastogne justified every controversy, every argument, every moment I consider relieving him of command. The paratroopers at Bastogne owe their survival to George's speed and aggression. The Battle of the Bulge might have become a catastrophic Allied defeat without his response. Eisenhower understood the impossible position Patton placed him in. He could not easily punish a man who repeatedly saved critical situations. "I cannot fire a man who wins battles," Eisenhower wrote. "I cannot even seriously reprimand him when he has just proven that his methods work. George is right too often for me to fundamentally change him, but difficult too often for me to truly enjoy working with him." Perhaps the clearest insight into Eisenhower's thinking came in a private message to British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. General Patton has demonstrated why, despite his difficulties, he remains invaluable. His relief of Bastogne may have saved the entire Ardennes campaign. I understand concerns regarding Patton's temperament. Those concerns are legitimate. However, his operational abilities are equally real. At this stage of the war, we require those abilities more than we require comfortable personalities. The relief of Bastogne permanently changed Eisenhower's relationship with Patton. Before the battle, Eisenhower often viewed Patton as a dangerous but talented commander whose impulsiveness constantly threatened Allied unity. After Bastogne, Eisenhower began viewing him differently. Patton was no longer simply a difficult subordinate with potential. He was now the proven commander who had delivered under impossible circumstances. In January 1945, Eisenhower held a conference reviewing lessons from the Battle of the Bulge. During the meeting, he publicly praised Third Army performance in unusually direct terms. General Patton's relief of Bastogne represents one of the outstanding operational achievements of this war. The speed, coordination, and aggressiveness displayed by Third Army established a standard for mobile warfare. Other commanders would do well to study this operation. For Eisenhower, this statement was significant. He had rarely used Patton as a public example because of the general's controversial reputation. But Bastogne forced even Eisenhower to acknowledge Patton's battlefield brilliance openly. Still, Eisenhower wanted clear limits. During a private meeting in February 1945, he reportedly warned Patton, "George, Bastogne bought you credibility that will last the remainder of this war. Don't waste it. You have proven you can accomplish the impossible when circumstances demand it. Now prove you can follow orders even when they conflict with your personal preferences. Be the commander I know you can become, the one who delivers miracles while still respecting the command structure." Despite the warning, Eisenhower's behavior toward Patton noticeably changed after Bastogne. For the remainder of the European campaign, Third Army received more operational freedom than almost any other Allied command. Eisenhower issued Patton broad objectives and allowed him far greater room to maneuver with minimal interference. The lesson Eisenhower had learned was simple. Patton performed best when given a target, and the freedom to attack it his own way. Years after the war ended, Eisenhower reflected on Bastogne, again in his memoir, Crusade in Europe. General Patton's relief of Bastogne vindicated my decision to retain him despite numerous controversies. His rapid movement of 3 divisions through terrible weather, his aggressive attack, and his breakthrough to the surrounded garrison demonstrated operational excellence at the highest level. History will judge Patton by his battlefield achievements, and Bastogne stands among his finest. But in private letters written decades later, Eisenhower's reflections became more personal. George and I shared a complicated relationship. He frustrated me constantly. Yet, when I received that phone call on December 26, 1944, hearing the words, "We're through to Bastogne," I felt overwhelming relief and gratitude. At that moment, the controversies no longer mattered. George had saved those paratroopers. He may have saved the entire Ardennes campaign. That is what I remember most. Not the arguments, not the frustrations, but the moment he delivered exactly when it mattered most. That phone call was more than a battlefield update. It became the defining moment in the relationship between Eisenhower and Patton, a moment of validation, trust, relief, and reluctant admiration. It revealed the burden every great commander faces. How do you lead a difficult genius whose flaws create constant problems when that same genius repeatedly saved the day? And on December 26, 1944, Eisenhower finally had his answer. When the impossible had to be done, Patton was the man who could do it. If you enjoyed the story of leadership pressure and battlefield brilliance during World War II, make sure to subscribe for more untold moments from history's greatest commanders. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on leadership and difficult subordinates, and share this story with anyone fascinated by the complexities of war and command.